All right, I think it's 2 p.m. We can get started. All right, guys. Thank you so much for everyone who could join, who's watching us live or the recording later on. My name is Shivam. I head Beans Recruiting, and thank you so much for joining our webinar around Linehaul recruiting and retention. We've been doing a lot of webinars on a regular basis around recruiting, but most of our focus and attention at Beans Recruiting has been around P&D. And that's pretty much been our focus the last couple of years. Early this year, we started helping Linehaul contractors within the FedEx ecosystem and outside with recruiting. As of today, we work with over 50 Linehaul contractors, and we've been able to successfully place 200 CDL drivers. And we realize that's a completely different beast. It is nothing similar to P&D recruiting. And it has its own set of challenges, its own sets of, issues to tackle. And we thought that while we've spoken about, lead generation around Linehaul, we've not really spoken about the whole recruiting effort, and most importantly, retention. And that's what we wanted to focus this session on. I'm joined today by Ronak, who heads our Linehaul recruiting. Ronak's pretty much spent his whole professional life in the CDL recruiting space. He understands this space very deeply. Steve's he's a veteran FedEx contractor. He's been in this space for more than 25 years, and he's here to help us understand this a lot better. But let me just get the ball rolling here. Again, Steve, Ronak, thank you so much for joining. Steve, I'd love to understand from you. I understand the last couple of years have been a little weird, right? In terms of recruiting in general, the labor market's been off. And if I remove the anomaly that was the last 2 years and just focus on how it's been before and how it's going to be moving forward, what would you say are the biggest challenges that you faced with recruiting, CDL drivers?
Well, I think it's a matter of not just CDL drivers, excuse me. I live in an area where there's a lot of hay fever. It's that time of year, so I apologize.
You're good.
The work environment of America today is so different, and some of us have not realized how it has changed. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and the expectation was you went to work at a place, you got a job, and you stayed there pretty much your whole career. And I read an article recently that the average 40-year-old today will have had 11 jobs. When I was growing up, my dad would have kicked my butt if I was going to have 11 jobs. But that's the reality of living in 2022. So it's not just a trucking thing. People are more mobile, and because of technology and all the services that we have, you can pick up and move to another part of the United States with, just like that's what you want to do. So we have to recruit knowing that who are the people that we're getting today, and what are their goals? What are they looking for? Are they looking for a long-term relationship? Is this, and they'll tell you that they are, but we used to be satisfied. Well, I go way back to the old trucking companies. They wanted to hire people for 20, 30 years. If we could get them to stick around for 5 years, that was great. Today, we're probably down to 2 years, 3 years, something like that. Now, a growing company is always going to have some interesting measurements, because if you're always adding new people because you're adding new routes, it's going to be skewed lower that you've had more new people than older. And so you look at some different averages. What is your turnover rate? What is your retention rate? What is your overall longevity? And our company, for example, it's about 2 years. We've had quite a few people up in that 5, 6, 7 category, but we had a lot of new work that came in 2020, 2021, and that was, so that's filling up so-called the bottom. We have a lot of people who have only been here 6 months, 9 months, or something like that. Prior to the pandemic, the challenge was there's so many opportunities out there. Again, technology today used to be you looked at the newspaper and saw what jobs were available, and that's it. You can go online and find jobs all over the world, all over the United States, whatever. And so our challenge as trucking companies, our challenge as contractors, is that recruiting is sales and marketing, and we have to know how to market ourselves. There has to be a reason why a driver would go to work for me instead of somebody else. And if I can't sell that, the rest of it really doesn't matter. At least that's my view.
It's interesting. Steve, so let me take a step back, right? I understand a lot of the problems that exist are attrition and, getting someone who's applied in the door. Let me ask you one step before. I know you're working with us of recently for recruiting, but you've obviously been doing a whole lot of that yourself in the last 20 plus years. Where would you traditionally find applicants? And what has your experience been on that front?
Well, going clear back to when I started, it was advertisement in the newspaper. A lot of it was word of mouth, telling somebody that knew somebody type thing, and just, networking. As the new technologies came out, at one time, Craigslist was pretty good for advertising. Today, I don't know that I would recommend to use it. Not that they're bad, but I think you just get kind of like lost in the shuffle. Some of the other tools that are out there, there's Indeed and ZipRecruiter and a lot of other people that focus on different things, and they're good, and you can get more out there. When I say more, we're always looking for the buzzwords, like home daily, new equipment, good pay, whatever the things is that people are going to be looking for. But I think there's you cannot, and I hope I'm asking your question properly here, but you can't have a one size fits all. You can't say we're going to use Indeed and that's it, or we're going to use referrals and that's it. You got to have a blend, and it takes a little extra work, but you got to track your results and see what really is working.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So, I absolutely understand what you're saying. The newspapers of yesterday are the job boards of today. Right. Personally, our expertise here is to generate leads. Obviously Indeed, ZipRecruiter, they're all fantastic job boards. But what we realized, like you were alluding to, these job boards, it gets super busy. Anyone and everyone with an internet connection and has a job opening can post and, spend a couple of dollars more to you and get, grab attention of the applicants. And what we try to focus slightly differently is, yes, we put a heavy amount of reliance on job boards, but we also try to use social media. We realize that when drivers, when they're not trucking around, they're spending their time on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and that's where we try to meet them. That's where we try to educate them of these, open positions, and that's where we try to generate a lot of interest. However, like you've identified just as we started, that's just a small part of the problem. Getting applicants is sort of the easy part. And again, I'm not talking about that last, the COVID year and a half and nobody seemed to want a job, but finding an applicant is a relatively easy part. What we found extremely difficult and, increasingly is to convince someone why he should choose your job over the other person, and why, because at the end of the day, a job to them is becoming a commodity, right? They're like, okay, you pay me $1,000 a week. That person's paying me $1,100. Why should I not jump ship? So Steve, how do you sell your company? Because at the end of the day, I mean, yes, you might have newer equipment, you might have, home daily. How do you differentiate your position and your company from the hundreds of other, trucking companies recruiting?
Well, the key thing you have to remember, I think, is there's two words that both start with the letter R: results and relationship. The results are how much are you paying? Well, like you said, one is $1,000, the other is $1,100. Why wouldn't you jump ship? Well, again, you get into some behavioral science things, whatnot, and people want to belong to something. Not everybody is just a loner that wants to just go out on their own. And so if there's something that they feel like they're part of something, or they're achieving something, getting something that they normally couldn't, like in the Linehaul space, in my industry or in my segment that I do, because we have just all day cabs, our drivers are home every day. So we have relatively new trucks, you're home daily, good pay, all drop and hook. You can go to work at another trucking company not related to our segment of the industry, and you got to unload groceries, or you got to sit and wait in line, and you're supposed to have a 7 o'clock appointment, and now they're not picking or unloading you till 11 o'clock or something like that. We have our share of frustrations, and it's good for us as owners, as contractors, whatever, to admit it that, hey, this is not perfect what we do here, but if we can explain that there are imperfections, but we can work through them. But what can you do to build that team? And it goes back to communication, awareness. This really is a hot button for me. We will take, say, 10 to 12 cents a mile and set that aside for maintenance on a truck. And so if you put 200,000 miles a year, well, let's just say it's 150,000 miles a year, 10 cents a mile is $15,000. We will maintain that truck, but in say 3 years, 4 years, that truck is wore out and we're going to get rid of it. But you hire a person and we won't give them health insurance, or we won't give them good health insurance. And when that 4 and 5 year old truck goes away, you can buy a new one and keep that same driver. So we have to take care of the whole thing that they're looking at. And how important is health insurance today versus other benefits? There's probably plenty of arguments out there, but we have a very generous health insurance plan. And in our particular case, we pay 60% of the premium for the driver and the family, because that's sending them a message. We care about you and the people at home.
Yep.
That's the relationship side. Does that cost us a little bit of extra money? You bet. But retention does not come free.
Interesting. Ronak, I know you have a lot of experience in this, in retaining drivers, building relationships. If you could tell us what you've done that's worked.
Sure.
And what doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. So what Steve just said, it's all about relationship and how you can maintain that relationship between your employee and also have the results, because if it's skewed one way, then it's not going to work. So for us, when I worked at Frito AFL Transportation, we had 150 drivers, 96 trucks, and 120 of them were CDL drivers. So we're consistently recruiting and retaining and making sure we kept them. So what we used to do is have like a FaceTime with them, right? In a way, basically sit outside. Every manager, we had 7 managers. Every manager would just put a time aside, right? Hour. Just put your computer away, put your phone away. You're just going to talk to drivers, right? Have a talk with them. Understand if it's a new driver, make sure that they are understanding everything about policy. So making sure your employees understand your policies is also very important, right? When you first start. So there's a study out there which says there are 54 activities that a new driver goes through before they're onboarded to your company. Now, think about it in a grand scheme of things. Like when you're sitting in a class or when you're talking to someone, how much of that will you retain? Normal person, 10, 15%. If you're really paying attention, writing things down, 20, 25%. I'm more like a 5%. Usually that's all I retain. So when I'm talking to someone, I will make sure if they're your employee, especially if they're new, make sure that you're having these talks, right? Talking to them, explaining them what your policies are, what is acceptable, what is not. So first thing you want to do when you're onboarding is slow things down for them as a new employee coming in. So then you have these talks weekly, explain them everything. If they don't understand, make sure they have access to you. So that goes a long way, right? Having access. Then we also did a lot of like free stuff. They love hats. So we used to give them hats. We used to have water bottles. We would have cookouts. So to keep them engaged, like Steve was saying, you got to engage them, build that relationship. And it could be something simple as, hey, it was a hot day. This was in Georgia. It was a hot day. We gave free water bottles, right? That goes a long way. Those small things go a long way from building a relationship and retaining. I always say retention is the best kind of recruiting. So we are really, like Shivam was saying, we're really good at, there are 5 things when you're hiring someone. First is getting your name out there, advertising, right? Lead generation. Then second thing is processing them. With us, unfortunately, we have to go through First Advantage for FedEx. Most of the FedEx contractors, and Amazon has a different portal. So anyway, so that's the second thing. We're really good at lead generation, processing, but then there's a handoff where we hand the candidate over to you guys, and then everything is in the contractor's hands. So there comes the responsibility as a contractor to take this new person who is only going to retain probably 5 or 10 of the activities that they have to go through out of 54, slowing it down, talking to them, making sure that, they ask about their family, having benefits. These fringe benefits go a long way as well. So it's very important to A, get to know your driver, B, build that relationship, and then C, to maintain that relationship and open communications to make sure that they stay with you. I know, Steve, I'm going to ask you this question. So a little bit of background. Steve and I met at the Linehaul Summit. We were having breakfast. It was him, his son, a couple other contractors, and we were just talking about this whole thing of retention, right? And I know Jason was like, "Hey, our retention is not bad." I asked him, "What is your retention looking like? What's the longevity of your driver?" And he told me it's about 20%. Is that correct?
Yeah, 20% turnover.
Yeah, 20% turnover and 80% retention. So in grand scheme of things, if you're looking at an industry, we have over 92% turnover year over year. The industry is going through that kind of turnover, and some studies say it's over 125%. So can you, Steve, tell me, over this long career of yours, what have you gone through, pay wise, benefits wise, and understanding how you kept, this good of a retention? So could you walk us through what your pay, how are you paying your guys, and what kind of benefits are you providing?
Okay, one comment that I do want to make, though, about the things that you said, Ronak, was that when you said about slowing it down, that is so important, because a new driver is excited, he's eager. A lot of times they're broke. They want, how quick can I start? Because I need a paycheck. I've got bills to pay and all that. And so even if you're talking to them, they're not absorbing it because they're in a hurry to get going. I understand that. I've been in that stage of my life too. So yes, that's slowing it down and taking the time to go through the process of getting them to understand coming on board is key. One of the first things really was the insurance. When we started offering health insurance, I just realized, looking at some other industries and background of the trucking industry, is that you look at what are the ways to get the most stability. There's single parents these days, and divorces and all the different things, and so you want to have as much stability. And then even if you got you're hiring an individual, they have a spouse and kids, you're taking care of the whole family. And even if the spouses are separated, there's either a child support thing or just a voluntary thing, whatever. And when you have that available and you're helping pay for part of it, and again, it goes back to that communication. Anything that we provide in health insurance benefit is for them as income and not tax. See, too many drivers today, and we're not good at this, we need to get better, is we need to explain the entire compensation package, because your take-home pay is one thing, and a lot of people worry about, well, how big is your W-2? But if I'm paying the health insurance, and you're not paying it out of your own pocket, and you're not having to pay taxes on it, that's huge. And then other things like whether it be retirement, other insurances or whatever, back to that relationship thing, it indicates that you're taking care of them, taking care of the family. We've added a few benefits with the retention in mind, but also things that make sense and they're pretty cost effective. One, for example, is short-term disability. Short-term disability is very inexpensive. As an employer, it does not cost me very much money. And everybody out there does not think they need short-term disability insurance until you need it. And then you're in deep trouble because you're off of work for 2 months or 3 months or something like that, and you still have bills. So, but explaining why you're doing it, again, as human beings, we want to be connected and we want to have conversations. So, and again, no matter how good we are, we need to get better at explaining what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because that retention, I know you guys get paid for lead generation, but every driver I retain is somebody I don't have to hire. And we're going to have attrition anyway. And one thing to throw in, as you pointed out, like if we have 30 drivers and have 20% turnover, well, I still have to hire 6 drivers a year. That's one every other month. So the worst thing we can do is say, well, I have enough drivers, I don't need to keep recruiting, or I have enough drivers, I have to stop advertising. No, that's a big mistake. But we really found in our areas where we took care of the driver, in that you show an interest in what's going on. Back in the days when I used to drive and I would be down at the station or the terminal, whatever, the drivers really appreciated that, hey, the boss is down here late at night and he's hooking and unhooking trailers and things like that. I'm an old man now, I don't do that anymore, but it's still, the drivers appreciate it if I show up at night and you have some type of message for them. And maybe there's a gift, and you get good ideas from everybody. I have a friend that's a contractor out in Colorado, and he gets to know it. Now he's only got maybe, I don't know, 13, 14, 15 trucks, probably, that many or a few more drivers, but he gets to know his people pretty well. And one guy likes Coca-Cola, so he'll bring those long, square packs of Coke or Diet Coke, whatever, and put in the guy's truck. Another guy doesn't drink soda, but he likes to play golf. So he'll go buy him some good golf balls and put them in his truck and things like that. So it's unique, and it sends a message that we care. Because in today's culture, there is so much going on. There's so much tension that people are craving just that belonging. And so what you pay for the benefits is one thing. The time that you invest, even in small things, again, gets them, when I say feeling, they just understand that there's a connection that's more than just that, hey, we're driving down the highway and dropping a trailer off.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Steve, we have one question from Thomas. Thank you so much for your question. Firstly, if anyone else has questions, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. Please feel free to ask. We'll try to answer them as we get them. So his question is, do you pay 100% short-term disability for your drivers?
Yes.
Awesome. And are there different plans? Is there limits, or does it cover their complete paycheck? Is it 70, percentage? How does that work?
Well, always it has to come with a disclaimer. I'm not an insurance agent. So contact your friendly insurance agent, and I'm sure he'll walk you through it. Our program, and I think it's pretty standard, is they have to be off of work for 2 weeks. And then after that, short-term disability kicks in, and I want to say it pays 60% for 13 weeks. And the cost of that insurance is a formula that they have that's based on, I think, the earnings potential, and it might be age-based too, because older or younger, something like that. I don't know for sure how they calculate the premium. I can tell you the average in my company is $25 a month per employee.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, going back to something you mentioned, Steve. You mentioned that the environment today is not what it used to be maybe 10, 20 years ago. We see that a lot as recruiters. So we are constantly recruiting drivers who work for another FedEx contractor who've applied for another one. And, obviously if someone's kind of applying for a similar job, similar pay, similar location, our first question is, why do you want to switch? And more often than not, and it's surprising, we're seeing that at P&D, we see that in CDL as well, where the person keeps coming back to saying, hey, the last contractor, he shorted me, he didn't pay me what I was due, he cheated me, and so on and so forth. And what we've kind of come to realize is that there's a massive trust deficit between the driver and the contractor. And I think a lot of it comes to, again, points you alluded to, that a lot of them don't understand W-2. They don't understand what their salary is versus what they'll get in hand. So Steve, I've seen a lot of FedEx contractors just don't do proper paperwork. They don't give detailed offer letters. They don't walk people through a sample paycheck. I'm curious, is that something you've encountered with drivers just feeling like they've been shorted by you? And what do you do to combat that?
Well, sometimes you hear as a general term, the best offense is a good defense. And we are, on the defense side, we explain to drivers that it's very important to us to pay you and pay you accurately. We're human beings. We might make a mistake. If there's a mistake, contact us, point us out, and we'll get it corrected. I encourage our drivers to have a Venmo account that if something comes up, we can instantly get the money to them, take care of the bookkeeping on our side. And, so yeah, taking care of them and taking care of them quickly is so important. You can't play with people's wages. That's all there is to it. This is an old school thing going back to mentors of mine years and years and years ago. If you promise somebody something, then you really should deliver. And you can have all the written stuff and whatever for documentation. It's your word. And if you say, I'm going to pay X number of dollars an hour, that's what it should be. And if you have this benefit or not that benefit, you're paying by the mile, paying by the day, whatever it is. Make that commitment and explain what's going on. And interesting, and this might be deviating from your question, but we have so many short haul things that we do that are just so much drop and hook, and drivers are always complaining, but there's so many drop and hooks, or I had to wait for this trailer or whatever. And so we did an experiment a few years ago and took part of our operation and shifted it to hourly pay. And we eliminated the headaches, we eliminated the complaints, we eliminated the have doing things over because we missed a drop and hook or something. If you came to work at 9 o'clock at night and you went home at 6 in the morning, you had 9 hours, and whatever your hourly rate was, you knew that that was the pay. And we kept it within the constraints of what our budget was. And it has not cost, it did not cost us any money because the drivers know that, hey, I'm on the clock, I'm getting paid. Now they're expected to perform, but they don't get to milk the clock or anything like that. But we've already removed an item from their mind that, the boss is trying to screw me. They can't think that because they know if they clock in, they're going to get paid.
Yeah. One real quick point I want to point out is even I was a P&D contractor for almost 3 years, right? Like what I found was whenever you keep it simple, it's a lot easier to explain, right? Just that KISS formula, like keep it simple, stupid, right? So just make it there is no, hey, deviation. If what you just said, right? You clocked in, they know they're getting paid. Now it's not like, well, trailer's not ready, I'm not getting paid. The boss is, screwing me in a way, right? So it's very important to keep it simple when it comes to pay, when it comes to, benefits, just making sure they understand, right? So I love that you are one of the few ones, Steve, when we have over 50 contractors that we're looking at their pay scale, 98% of them are on, cents per mile. So,
and Ronak, it's not only cents per mile, and I want to speak to everyone attending this. Ever so often, and at least once a week, we get a new client, fill up our form, and when they give us details of pay, it takes us 15 minutes to just understand. And if it takes me 15 minutes to understand, and we're working with over 250 businesses to help them recruit, imagine the same thing on the driver. Firstly, as a recruiter, communicating this to the driver effectively is a massive challenge. You lose a lot of potential candidates just because they don't understand. And then implementing this has to be an admin headache to keeping track of 5 different moving parts. And then coming to the point we started with, this just stems potential for misunderstandings. And this just, it's just, we've seen this too often. People, I understand contractors are trying to align your business goals with the driver's goal, the financial goals. And, in a perfect world, that makes sense. But we're seeing this too often. We're seeing over-engineered pay structures, and our advice, and I think Steve is speaking to the same thing, keep it as simple as possible. You will be surprised as to the amount of headache you can remove from your business. And how effective it can be as a retention strategy if you could keep a simple pay structure.
Well, in 2007, a gentleman named Rich Wold was doing some consulting and mentoring whatnot with me, and he was a retired vice president of HR for, I think it was Toyota or something like that. And so, he knew what he was talking about, and he emphasized to me that, Steve, don't fall into what he called it, the be like me syndrome. Don't be thinking that everybody thinks the same way as you do. As business owners, we think that, well, we've got all these, like you said, it's over engineered, but we have all these factors that are going on, so I got to protect my income and everything like that. Well, what we're doing is shifting our risk. Like if a trailer isn't ready and a driver showed up and we don't pay him, we have shifted our risk of no income, no revenue at that point, to the driver. And the driver, if he wanted to take on the risk, he'd go buy a truck and be an owner operator. And so part of their thinking is that I'm not getting paid, but when we finally get paid, the boss gets the money, but I put the time in and I haven't got it. So it's kind of sharing the wealth. But when you take care of them, and, and I've adjusted time. So I've had FedEx say, be here at 10 o'clock. And I say, baloney, you're never ready at 10 o'clock. My driver's coming in at 11. And when you show me that you can be ready at 10, we'll come in at 10. And you put the pressure back on them for them to perform. But there's such a key factor about this topic too. And I just saw something that had popped up in the comments. One of the biggest concerns about safety is distracted driving. And immediately you think about the driver has a phone in his hand, or he's taking, eating a hamburger or doing whatever it is. But if he's thinking about something else, like I'm getting ripped off and I need to look for a different job and I'm not getting paid what I should, he's thinking about that instead of driving. And it's a safety issue at that point, because if he's not paying attention to the road, he's going to run over something or run into something, back into something, whatever. And it's interesting. If I say on a count of three, don't think about pizza. 1, 2, 3. What are you thinking about? Pizza. And so what we tell the driver, the last thing, hey, I've done this, and okay, now we're talking about safety, but that's part of the retention. I've taken a newspaper article or a picture, nothing to do with FedEx, to the drivers and just say, what do you think happened here? Well, somebody probably cut him off. It might be a truck that's turned over on its side in the highway. Somebody probably cut him off. He probably swerved. They have all kinds of ideas. They don't know what happened. But now the conversation has been about being safe instead of thinking about my paycheck or my kid needs tennis shoes or I've got a dental bill to pay or something like that. So when we engage them in the positive conversations that we can have, that's part of the retention process rather. And it also helps solve some of the safety problem because they're thinking about being safe, not everything else that they have to think about.
Interesting. Oh, fantastic. No, thank you for that, Steve. My next thought around this space is basically, again, Steve, when you started off, you said everyone wants to be a part of something bigger. Now, as a line haul contractor, this is in P&D. You may have runs all across the state or maybe multiple states. How do you build that community spirit? How do you build that relationship with those drivers, and especially, a contractor like you having a couple dozen drivers? How do you keep that relationship going? Because it has to get difficult.
Well, it is difficult. And again, we've done a few things. We're developing some things. We're probably not as good as we should be. When we have 6 locations for 30 drivers, you got places where you only have 3 or 4 drivers. You got some where you have 10 or whatever. At each location, I have either a manager or a lead driver, and we try to communicate through them. We haven't done this recently, but when COVID set in, we even had some Zoom safety meetings where drivers, and it's hard, some guys worked early and some guys work late, so you're not going to get everybody on the same meeting, but you can use technology and stay in touch. Some of our admin people, we have them set up on maybe it's every 60 days or 90 days to just call the driver and do what we call a wellness call.
Yeah.
How's it going? How's the kids? Hopefully we're a small enough organization that we can remember things. Did you get that swimming pool installed? Hey, how was that vacation? When it takes, you have to be intentional about it. You can't say, hey, we communicate well. And yeah, a lot of people talk well. Are you talking or are you communicating? That's 2 different things. And the different people communicate in different ways. Some people will just be glad for a phone call. Some people like a visit in person. And so we are empowering our lead drivers or managers, however we classify them, to be able to have some conversations. And again, another thing we just don't do it often enough, is when you hear that somebody did something that was really, great. And think about sports. When you come off the field and you made a good play, you get an attaboy from the coach. Mm-hmm. You send them a $25 gift card to a convenience store, a Walmart, a grocery store, or whatever, and just say, hey, thanks for taking care of whatever. That goes a long way. It really does.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Ronak, do you want to add something to that?
No, I mean, the only thing I would say is we used to do that with, when I worked at FL Transportation, right? So we used to have a reward program where, Steve, exactly what you said. It's like one driver saw another drivers were struggling, went out and helped, just out of, good team spirit, just saw that this is a new driver, let me help out, unload these boxes, right? And when we have a trailer, these guys are taking a trailer full of 1,800 to 2,200 boxes, right? People think, oh, chips, yeah, it's not heavy, but when you have a box full of Fritos, and then you have dip, and all those things add up. So they're going in and out and delivering to these PEC. So when someone goes out of their way, we used to just same thing, right? Hey, good job, in front of everybody. When we would have that round table or like open table, we would just appreciate, be like, good job, David. You did an awesome job. Here's your $25. And those things will go a long ways to build just good, good
Yeah.
systems where they start recognizing, hey, these guys are recognizing my good work, and they're, actually very helpful, and they're giving me a reward for it. So small gestures go a long way.
No,
Well,
yeah, go on, Steve.
well, one of the things you mentioned earlier, and this is like, when you think about recruiting, it's like 2 or 3 steps removed, but you mentioned that people don't necessarily have good records. I understand accounting, but I'm not an accountant. But one of the things that we look at, I get a weekly report that, in my world, they call it my direct expenses. And it's the driver's wages, the benefits, fuel, DEF, and an allocation for maintenance. And those are my direct expenses. What's left over is contribution to overhead, because it can go for truck payments, it can go for vacation, or well, vacation's already covered in the benefit, but it can go for my Harley if I was going to buy one or something like that. Whatever the money that's left over is what's left over, but you got to make your truck payments and whatnot out of that. Well, if you have a truck not moving, you have no revenue coming in, and that, say, 66%, if 2/3 of it was your direct expenses, you've got 1/3 that you should have got, but you didn't. And if the truck is, I'm just going to make up some numbers here to just do easy math, but if if that 1/3 that's left for you is $1,250 a week, that's $5,000 a month. And so from an expense standpoint, all these extra benefits or the recruiting cost or whatever, would I trade 1 month of margin to get 11? And the answer is yes. I'll gladly give up $5,000 so I can get $55,000. But if I'm stubborn and think, no, I'm not going to give anybody any money, so we have a very generous retention bonus. Year one, you get $1,000, and it's $1,250, $1,500. It goes up by $250. We got a guy that's been here 8 years. He's getting a pretty fat check.
Nice.
Probably about $2,800. But if it costs $6,000 to recruit somebody, why not share the wealth with him, and you got the continuity? So, but if we don't understand our numbers, everybody will say you got to know your numbers. We have to know them and then understand them, because it's going to cost money to sustain our business. And we can give it to the employee, or we can give it to you guys, or we can give it to the, Peterbilt, or you can give it to the bankruptcy court when you fail.
No, absolutely. And that's what we keep hearing from Linehaul contractors. The opportunity cost of not having a truck seat filled is just so high. It's not the same as P&D. P&D, there are easier ways to cover sit-in routes. You can get the contractor next to you to help out. But with Linehaul, the dynamics are significantly different. Your truck payments are a lot larger. The opportunity cost of having a vacant seat is obviously a lot higher. But let me, I had one more, discussion on recruiting. And then I wanted to kind of, before we run out of time, I want to talk about peak. I know that's in a lot of people's mind as we kind of head towards it. Steve, what we believe is the best quality of candidates that anyone ever gets, regardless of the industry, is referrals, right? Your employees would be and especially the good ones, would be the source of your best hires. We've seen that on and on again, where we call up existing FedEx drivers who we've placed, ask them if a friend of theirs is looking for a job. and they always turn out to get great people through the door. How has your experience been around referrals? Do you run a referral program? And what has your experience been? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we do have a referral program, and ours is, I mean, there's other ones out there that are maybe more generous than ours, but we pay $2,500 to our employees if they bring us a driver. But that's spread out over time. And so like they'll get, $500 immediately and then incrementally go up so that somebody doesn't come in, quit 30 days later, and now you spent a lot of money. One of the things with the referral is most people, if they're really satisfied with you, they're going to bring a quality candidate. Deep down, we want to maintain our reputations. So somebody's not going to refer somebody that they know is not a good character because that guy might be driving your truck someday and spill coffee in it or whatever is all going on. There's a lot of things that can go through your mind. So you're absolutely right. The referrals are are a great source of getting drivers. And they're also not retention bonuses, but sign-on bonuses. There was an article that was in Transport Topics a couple of years ago. A sign-on bonus was not even in the top 5 of things that drivers are looking for. Now we throw it out there as a carrot and everybody will take it. But if somebody's really looking for increased pay, new equipment, and home daily or something like that, that's what they're looking for, and they may or may not really care about the sign-on bonus.
I absolutely agree. Especially over the last couple of years, we've seen absolutely ludicrous sign-on bonuses. And I understand when you're in a pinch and you want to fill the seats, it's a good tool to have, and especially when everyone next to you is doing that. But sign-on bonuses also attracts sort of short-term employees who are kind of just looking at that, and they're just working towards that that couple $1,000 sign-up bonus. We've seen, $10,000, $15,000 sign-up bonuses, obviously paid over time. But I'm not sure, and again, we don't have data, but I'm not sure if that attracts the best quality of candidates, right? You'd rather invest that money in stable pay, benefits, equipment, and that might attract more long-term oriented drivers. But, Steve, just shifting gears here, peaks upon us. And I know there's a lot of chatter in the FedEx ecosystem with, and the macroeconomic environment with volume. What are your thoughts? And I understand, I think I already know your take, but, just for everyone watching, what are your thoughts on peak? What is your plan on retention, on recruiting? And yeah.
Well, I think in so many things that we've been dealing with, it's like, this is like nothing we've ever seen. And we've been saying that for the last, 2-3 years. I have a feeling that this is going to be a peak like we've never seen. Not that it's that big. I think it's going to stumble. The consumers that are paying 10% more now, I saw a program the other day that if you had $100 at the beginning of 2020, it's only worth $88 now. And if you're on a fixed income and you have to raise kids and buy tennis shoes and buy groceries, and I just talked to somebody earlier today that's got 3 teenage boys and she can't even keep the refrigerator full because they're just chow hounds eating all the time. What does that mean? Why does that impact Linehaul? Because the consumer spending, there's only so much money left over. Now, I think it's important to remember there's still a core business there. And going way back old school, my dad always told me if things got really bad and there was a recession, depression, if there's 15% unemployment, I'm going to be part of the 85%. Right now, volume is down at FedEx, but it didn't go down to zero. If they were picking up 12 million packages a day a while ago, say maybe a year ago, it's down to 10 million. Well, then we need to adjust our business to handle that 10 million. And it's going to pick up during peak, but I don't see these 30 and 40% spikes coming this year. And so I'm planning on, marginal 5-10% increases in some of my areas. In some areas, I just look, I can't add any trucks. The economics of it are, we might be able to find a driver short term and keep them busy. And by the time you get to January or February, there's somebody else that's quit and you keep them or whatever. So you might have some turnover and some churn. but not that bad. But if you go out and buy a truck, I want to know who's going to make my truck payment in February. Yeah, it's going to be busy from now until Christmas, but after the first of the year, who's going to pay for all this overhead? We are better served if we can come up with a way to better utilize the equipment that we already have. And we've addressed that by paying overtime for drivers that work a 6th day of the week. And back to your keep it simple statement, we used to have kind of a formula. A lot of people were like, well, yeah, and all that. So with the new contract here, I just decided I'm tired of all the misunderstandings. And if you work 5 days, you get paid whatever your straight pay is. And if you work a 6th day of the week, we pay time and a half for that day. Now we got people asking, hey, can I work this Saturday?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the cost differential between the two maybe was 3%. And now I don't have to fight to get people to work. So,
yeah.
But back to your question about peak, I don't think we're going to see the huge spikes, but it really depends on what part of the market you're in. Even within line haul, guys that are primarily doing trailer spots versus guys that have solo runs versus the teams. Like once a team leaves on Tuesday and they're not coming back till Saturday, you're committed for the whole week. If you got shorter runs, you might have an assigned run that's 5 days a week and it jumps up to 7. But if things are slow, maybe it drops back to 4 days a week. Every single contractor out there has to adapt their business to what fits them. It's good to get information from what the other people are doing and thinking, but each one of us has a responsibility to understand our own business and say, hey, what am I going to do to take care of my customer, which is FedEx, take care of my drivers, but you have to take care of yourself too. It's like a 3-legged stool. You got to have all 3 of them on the ground. And the way that we take care of ourselves is have the recruiting process, have the people in place, have the incentive programs to get them to work, but don't overextend your capital, don't overextend your expenses beyond what peak might be.
Oh, absolutely. Steve, just a follow-up question. Regardless of the extent of staffing, you would, or most people would hire additional resources during peak to service that surge in demand, be that 10, 20%, or be that 40%. Now, my question to you is, typically, when you've got extra bodies come January end, how do you one way is obviously natural. You have people leaving, and you just stop recruiting for a month or two, and things normalize. But what else is your strategy? Do you kind of bring their hours down, or how do you deal with extra manpower at the end of peak?
Well, one thing we did a few years ago, and that's when we didn't have so much volatility with the Saturday and Sunday work and everything, when we were pretty much a 5-day operation and we had 20 drivers and normally there's 20 work days a month. If things slowed down, I went to all the drivers and said, would you be willing to take 1 day off a month so that we don't have to lay anybody off? And I don't think there's a decent human being alive that would say no to that. But if you don't communicate and don't talk to your people, well, then you don't get anywhere. But that's one thing, is that figure out how you can, how can you spread the work out during that slow period. And then, as we said before, you're going to have some attrition. You're going to have some people that just naturally are leaving for whatever reasons, and you just build that back up. In my business, we have it kind of like this. I don't have the peaks and valleys that go like that. So you just manage those little dips. And, but the thing is always keep bringing the people in that you need, because, we had somebody give notice here earlier this week, got a special needs child and just can't be on the road at night. He's got to be home to help take care of the child during the day. Loves working for us, but family comes first. I understand that. We have to replace him. We've already got somebody in place. I staff at 113%. So if you do the math, if you need 25 drivers, multiply that times 1.13, and there's no such thing as a fraction of a driver unless you get a part-time person, and you just round it up to that, and that's the number of drivers you need to run your business. Because see, not only do you have peak, we have vacations, and the kids have softball, and somebody's got to go to a funeral, or you're going to go to a wedding or something like that. So a former manager that I worked with at FedEx used to work for UPS, and they were staffing at 110%, and that's what I did up until COVID. And so the way this is going on, I've changed my number to 113. And so you got to try to spread that out over 12 months over your entire base of business. but it's better to pay the money there than it is that lost opportunity cost of not having your trucks on the road.
And I'll add one more thing, right? Like exactly what Steve said. It's better to pay upfront and have a pipeline of people than on the back end where FedEx is on you because you cannot service the volume and you keep on rejecting and FedEx keeps on coming. So we just had a client, and he was already on the back end of it where he's getting pressure from FedEx that he's going to lose a spot, right? So he's asking us, we are good at what we do, but we're not magicians. The process is what the process is. It takes some time to build the pipeline, right? Understanding first, what we do is we do analysis of what the market is because it's very nuanced and every market is different. Ohio is different than Missouri. Kentucky is different from Georgia. So we have to understand the market. We have to figure out what works. So that takes about 3 to 5 business days, right? To understand what advertising works, where we're going to, which platform we're going to, deploy the dollars. Then it takes about 5 to 7 days more to get that built up. So basically you've lost 2 weeks. And if you're on the back end where, hey, you don't have enough people in the pipeline, or if something happens because life happens and things happen to people and they find either other job or something has come up, like you just mentioned that, hey, they have to take care of their child and there's no way around it. So life happens with everybody. It happens to me. It happens with Steve. It happens with Shivam, right? So you have to be very cognizant of, hey, do you have a pipeline of people that can come in? So it's very important to build that up and keep it up just in case if something happens, because now you're going to be hearing from FedEx, which nobody likes to hear. As a contractor, I never liked a phone call from them. Especially it's like, hey, you're not doing this right. It's like, okay, I never get a call which is like, you're doing great, everything's good. And no calls are basically,
Really?
you're doing something okay with FedEx. But so you always want to be on the front end loaded, meaning you want to have a good pipeline because life happens to people and it's just a way of life. So
well, I can affirm that. I have a friend named Brian who's in the marketing business. And as you describe it as a pipeline, just think of it as your garden hose outside. You want to have a little trickle of water coming through. Yeah, you're full right now. You don't need to be at the maximum budget for advertising spending, but you want to. If you stop digital marketing, it takes a while to retrain the algorithm to get your ad out there. So you want to keep a little bit of a trickle going and have a good enough system where you take names, do some screening over the phone, and we don't have anything right now, or we have something, but it's a few weeks down the road or whatever it is. But then when something happens and you have to turn the faucet up a little bit, the algorithm is already working for you and it's just going to make more hits. And so that's the key thing, I think, for all of us to keep in mind is that recruiting, basically it's the attraction of talent. Doesn't matter if the talent's truck drivers or nurses or teachers or whatever. The sales and marketing part is what you folks do. But once you hand the ball to me, I can't fumble it. If I do, I think, what I'm putting together is what I call the roadmap for talent, roadmap for talent acquisition, because it's just like the interstate highway. We need to block the exits so that the guy can't get off and go to a different job. And your job might be to get him partway down the road. Then I have to take him, have somebody in my company do whatever. And then we still have to onboard him with all the paperwork and the W-2s and the I-9s and everything like that. So there's all those different components have to come together. But when we understand that that's a roadmap that you have to follow to get it done, well, if you shut off the pipeline at the front, there won't be anything to fill in on the backside.
Absolutely. And, I know this is self-serving to a large extent, but at Beans Recruiting, our mode, what we tell everyone is always be recruiting, simply because we have seen, unfortunately, so many businesses in a debt spiral. The worst time you want to be recruiting is when you need a driver. And unfortunately, and it's more prevalent in P&D, but I think it applies to Linehaul as well. That it's either you driving the business or the business driving you. And if you're a couple drivers short and you're in a pinch and you're in a bad spot with FedEx, things get from bad to ugly. And I've seen a lot of desperation. You put a lot of pressure on your existing employees who then start quitting or feeling the pressure. And it just kind of spirals out of control. We've seen that way too often. And like you said, Steve, any pipeline takes about a week to 2 to build up. And then we have First Advantage to deal with. And I know there's a lot of hate to First Advantage, but let me tell you guys categorically that, we recruit for Amazon as well. And people are surprised to understand, but Amazon system isn't any better. It may be a couple steps behind First Advantage, but you have First Advantage. You have these fairly elaborate employment verifications in Linehaul, the background checks. After that, the drug tests, the road tests, like the whole process for a CDL driver extends well beyond 30 days to get the right person in the door. And there are a lot of people who fall off, who find other jobs, who lose interest, who life happens to them, and thus, I guess again, the risk of being a little salesy, always keep recruiting. That's kind of our what we tell people all the time, and it serves most people well. But with that said, I think we're just at time. Steve, Ronak, thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for joining us, whoever's live and who is watching us are recording on YouTube. Thank you so much for your time. If you want to just discuss recruiting, understand your market, understand how we work, you could drop us an email at fxgrecruiting@beans.ai. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for their time, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you, Ronak.
Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor to be included. I enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.